So I come from MPC world. MPC is how I got into this whole sample-based Groovebox thing. And I've tried the new MPCs. I had the MPC 1 for a while. I really want the MPC Live 2. That's a whole nother video series. But for now, I figured maybe I can hook a 16-pad controller up to my Digitakt and get something similar. So that's what I tried to do. That's what I'm going to walk you through in this video. Moral of the story, you're not going to get an MPC if you hook a pad controller up to Digitakt. There are some kind of limitations that keep you from getting all the way there. But as you saw in the intro, I got kind of close, and I'm going to show you how I set it up that way and how I got my pads to talk to the Digitakt, and any pitfalls to look out for, you know, things that you can work around, limitations, Elektron limitations that you can work around. So yeah, that being said, I had a ton of fun with this. I hope you do too. Let's go over to the desk and I'll show you how I set it up. All right, so let's start with what I'm using, and then I'll talk about how I'm using it, how I've got it connected, and some tricks to make it a little more useful. This is the XGM by ESI or Artesia Pro, depending on which country you're in. It's a really affordable 16-pad MIDI controller. You can find them everywhere. And I talked about this pad controller in a recent video called My Approach to Finger Drumming, so I won't get into it too much. Long story short, this thing is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Pads are super, super sensitive, very responsive, very expressive, and it's got kind of everything you need. It's small, it's durable, it's got a USB-C for power or MIDI, and it's got an 1/8 inch physical MIDI out, which you need if you want to work this setup. And it's customizable, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit when I talk about setting up this gear to work with each other. I'm going MIDI out, physical 1/8 inch MIDI out of the XGM into the Digitakt. Obviously, I'm using an adapter to go from 1/8 inch to 5-pin. And once you connect these things straight out of the box, what this is going to do is it's going to trigger your sample in 16 different pitches. So like when I first plugged this in, it just triggered my kick drum across 16 different pitches, which is obviously not what we want, right? We want each pad to trigger a different track. You can see here, track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, so on and so forth. And the way that you do that, if you go in here to MIDI config in the Digitakt, is you have to make sure that your pad controller is sending MIDI on a different channel for each individual pad. That's how the Digitakt works. You can see here that by default, the track 1 MIDI channel is channel 1. Track 2 is channel 2. So on, all the way till you get up to channel 9, and by default, this is set to off. So first thing you want to do is you want to go through and make sure that tracks 1 through 16 are all set up to receive their respective MIDI channel. 14 goes to 14, 15 goes to 15, all the way up to 16. And then the last thing you want to do, just so that your MIDI messages don't get mixed, is you want to turn off auto channel. Auto channel is set to 10 by default, and that means that whatever track is selected, your pad controller will trigger on that track. You don't want that for this particular purpose, so turn that off. I turn effects control off. Maybe there's some cool stuff you can do with it. I don't know. Leave a comment. And then program changes, I just leave that set to auto and haven't run into any issues or anything like that. So now Digitakt is configured, and then you got to configure your pad controller. So most pad controllers by default will not send a different MIDI message on a different channel on a per pad basis. So you have to get into the editing software that comes with your MIDI controller. This one has a super simple editing software. It took me like 2 minutes to do this, but I went through and I made sure that each pad was triggering on the channel that I want the Digitakt to play back. This, I wanted to hit track 1. This, I wanted to hit track 2, so it's sending channel 2. This, I wanted to hit track 3, so it's sending channel 3. You get it. I went all the way through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 16, and now each pad corresponds to a specific track on Digitakt. You do need a pad controller that gives you this flexibility. If it's fixed or if you can't do a per pad channel change, this isn't going to work for you. And then the last thing you want to check is your note value. So if this pad sends anything other than a C5, like a C6 or a D5, your sample is not going to play back at that original pitch. It's going to adjust the pitch based on what it thinks is a keyboard note coming in. So just make sure that not only is each pad sending an individual channel that corresponds to tracks, it's also sending C5. Every single pad, C5, note 60. Make sure you do that. That was a lot of technical jargon. Let's talk about something a little more fun. And one of my favorite things about finger drumming with Digitakt, and that is velocity mods. So on a typical sample track, you can trigger it at a harder velocity or a softer velocity, right? But the sample itself doesn't change other than the volume. It just plays back at a lower volume or a higher volume. On a real drum, or like a drum kit, however, the fundamental sound of the drum changes depending on how hard you hit it. Let's take snare drum, for example. If you hit it harder, the snare is going to ring out. It's going to have more decay. And if you hit it softer, it's going to have less decay and it's going to be a shorter time. This is where you can use velocity mods to make your drums sound a little bit more realistic. And how you do that is you choose the track you want to affect. So let's take track 2, for example. You go into setup and then you go down here to velocity mod. So I already have this set up. So let's see. If I turn this value down to 0 and play my snare, the decay time is really, really, really short, right? But if I turn this value up, and by the way, you can choose whatever value you want by just scrolling through here and selecting a value. I have decay time chosen. If I turn this up, now as I play at a softer velocity, it plays with a really, really short decay time. But if I hit it harder, it increases the decay time just a little bit. And it's really subtle. You might not even notice it unless you're really laying into it or have dramatic values. But I love it because it makes it feel a little bit more like I'm playing realistic drums. They respond a little bit more like you would expect drums to respond. I did the same thing on hi-hat. So shorter decay time, longer decay time, depending on what you set for your value here. So check out velocity mods. They're really fun, not just for this purpose, but like I said, you can choose a whole bunch of values in here and manipulate things in crazy ways. And then, of course, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. That is sample chopping. On the Digitakt, there is no sample chopping. You have grid mode, which will chop your sample into predetermined lengths based on a grid, but you can't actually choose physical slice points on Digitakt, which is, it's well documented. People talk about this. I don't need to get into that here. Elektron knows all about it. They hear about it constantly, I'm sure. So we won't harp on that. But how did I do this? That sure seems like I sliced up a sample, and I kind of did using a workaround that's pretty well known, but it comes with drawbacks. So first, let me show you what I did. If I go to track 15, you can see my entire sample, and I'll turn the length up so that that's how my sample started. This came from a Semantics lo-fi toolkit, I think it was. First, what I did is I took this entire sample track and I copied it by going track copy and then choosing another track and going track paste. And I pasted my sample across 3 different tracks. Same thing here. Track copy, choose 13, track paste. So now that sample is on all 3 of these tracks. And on each individual track, I chose my start and end point, right? So really quickly here, let me just make something up. There's one chop, so to speak. And then let's put a different start and end point here. How about that? Weird. Okay. And then let's put another start and end point right here. Kind of like this. So now 3 different chops, right? Chops is in air quotes. These aren't chops in a traditional sense because they're not on the same track, but they're played across 3 tracks. And it seems like that would work how you would expect an MPC or something to slice samples. But the drawback is these are across 3 separate tracks, right? So if I want to adjust volume or pitch or effects, I have to do that 3 times across 3 sample tracks. They don't all get adjusted together, which is obviously a drawback. I reloaded the pattern I had before, so I have my original slices back. I try to use this to my advantage when I can. For example, those 2 samples are the same. They're the same volume. They have no effects or anything like that. But this one is sent to delay, reverb, chorus, sample rate reduction. If you were going to do this on a single track with sample chops, you'd have to use some crazy automation to be able to achieve that. I guess you could kind of think of this as an advantage in that way, because your samples are on different tracks. It's easy to make them all sound really unique and manipulate them quickly by just sending one of them to a delay or one of them to a chorus or something. So yes, it's a drawback to have samples across 3 different tracks, but play with effects. Maybe you can come up with something cool that way. And then the other thing that's kind of a bummer is that there are no choke groups on Digitakt. If you're not familiar what a choke group is, you can put samples into a single group and they choke each other. So like you play a sample, and if you play it again, it stops what was playing before and starts playing the new one. Because there are no choke groups on Digitakt, you can't really get creative with how you trigger your samples because they'll overlap and become kind of a jumbled mess. I actually haven't really found a good workaround for this. You can put parameter locks in a sequence to cut samples off, but if you're triggering them live with a pad controller, I can't think of anything that you can do to kind of simulate choke groups. If you can think of something or know of something, please, by all means, comment below and let me know what it is. But the way that I mitigate that is I just chop my samples so that I know how they're played and they don't overlap. So by default, they're just not going to step on each other's toes, and that's how I deal with that. Like I said in my intro, this is not like an MPC by any means. It's not like you hook this up and then boom, you've got an MPC on your hands. But if you're used to a pad controller, and particularly if you're used to plugging things in a sequence by finger drumming them by hand, this is a really fun way to go. I'll demonstrate that. So if I clear my sequence and let's do just let's turn my metronome on and then let's do an unquantized recording, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like that. Of course, you can quantize on a per pattern or per track basis. But yeah. Just kind of a fun way to think about this in a new light. Anyways, I've been having fun with this. I hope that this was helpful or useful for you. As always, if you can think of a tip or trick that I missed, please leave it in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I really, really appreciate it. It means the world. I may or may not have a video next week. It's going to be holidays. I'll be with friends and family. If you are too, I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful time and find some time to make some music. As always, thanks for stopping in. Thanks for watching. You guys are the best. I'll see you on the next one.